Hello, welcome back. Session 12, nearly halfway through, polar ecosystems. The Arctic and Antarctic are undergoing rapid and visible transformations, acting as early warning systems for the rest of the planet. In this session, students working in polar environments and researchers with long-term experience in these regions will share both scientific insights and human perspectives on
landscape and ecosystem shifts, which are already observable on polar field operations. Also studies in relation to stressors such as ocean acidification and also the warming threats of climate change, but also the particular emotional and operational impacts of conducting science in places which are visibly transforming in a short time. With us today, we have a nice panel with Ludovic, Steve Como, and Megan Shimpton. Steve Como is a researcher at Sorbonne University in France at Love, and Megan Shimpton was a student with Steve doing some field operations in Arctic.
And we're also joined by Ludwig in Finland, who's a PhD student in fish ecology from Turku University.
And Thibaut Combaz supposed to be with us, but he had to urgently go repair some stuff on the big oceanic vessel about to leave in Canada, but we just had time this morning to record an interview. So maybe you can start with you, Ludovic. So the idea is that you can just share about what you're doing and your work in PhD.
Okay, sure. Let me share the screen. I don't see it. Okay.
It's coming.
All right, perfect. So good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for the MarWorld team to organize this impressive event and to give me the floor to speak about my experience and research. So I'm Ludovic Toisul, and I'm a third-year PhD student at the University of Turku in Finland. And what I study is the climate change and hypoxic environment impact on fish ecophysiology. So more specifically, what I'm interested in is in the impact of fluctuating hypoxia on this nice fish species that is a three-spine stickleback within and across generation. So basically, throughout my PhD, I've been trying to answer this question with different aspects. For instance, I look at the whole animal response. So everything that is from the behavior change, the metabolic rate, the swimming performance, and the hypoxia tolerance of the fish. I'm also quite interested in the physiology mechanism underlying this whole animal response. So everything from the mitochondrial efficiency, the Gill's histology, as well as the heart rate. And finally, the last aspect of my PhD was on the hypoxia adaptation and all the underlying mechanism and if fish were able to adapt in the short time frame of climate change. So what is hypoxia? So hypoxia is a decrease of oxygen within aquatic ecosystem. And that's so an increase in both the intensity and frequency of events due to climate change and anthropogenic conditions. So obviously I don't have time to explain all the causes of hypoxia, but two quite important is the increase of eutrophication, leading to a boom of photosynthetic organisms, which can themselves create oxygen during the day with photosynthesis, but take oxygen from the water through respiration during the night. So it can create this fluctuating hypoxia. And of course, due to the massive die-off of those photosynthetic organisms, that will lead to depletion of the oxygen in the water, leading to those hypoxic events. So this trend has been increasing and being more and more global. And as you may understand, there is detrimental consequences for the aquatic organism living in those ecosystems, such as the fish. So my biggest question in this PhD is how are the fish going to respond to hypoxia? So first answer could be that they can migrate and leave. But in some ecosystems, such as a lake, for instance, it's not possible. So they have to cope with the stressor. And more if we look in the future where the condition in the ocean might become globally hypoxic, it's even harder. So there are different mechanisms that take place that I study. Within neurodegeneration, we have, of course, the plasticity. Fish will have a different phenotype that will help them to cope. They can also transmit this phenotype to their offspring without changing the DNA through intergenerational plasticity. And of course, there is like adaptation process if hypoxia become persistent, changing DNA, leading to evolution. So the big challenge in my field to really trying to understand how climate change and especially hypoxia is going to impact the fish is really to look at this big picture. And we are currently quite lacking on the middle term and long term of intergenerational plasticity and adaptation process. So basically, this is my research.
Thank you, David. So we'll have time to come back to it, of course, during the exchange and the discussion. We can go to Steve and Megan now. And so, Steve, so you have worked on corals ecosystem, and so we will see you a little bit later when we'll talk about Australia and the Kimberleys and the tropics. But now you are working on polar ecosystems, and Megan had the chance to join you. When was it? 1 year ago?
3 years ago? 2 years ago?
3 years ago now, yeah.
3 years ago. Yeah.
My God.
Time.
Yeah.
So, who would like to take the lead? I know Megan, if you want to take the lead on your
Megan, you can
experience.
Okay, sure. No problem. So what I was able to do with Steve in my time with Marez as a student, we were able to go out and really look at these ecosystems and what was happening with in situ measurements. And we talk about the ecosystems that we looked at in the Arctic. Let's see if I can just present my sheet screen.
Which one do you want?
Just to show the photos that I have the share screen. Not sure if that's something that you can see.
Yeah, you can see it.
Yeah. So that's what it looks like if we're sending instrumentation out into these ecosystems. So it's macroalgae or kelp. And we wanted to figure out what was happening as the Arctic region is changing with rising temperatures and ocean acidification. It's kind of trying to figure out in situ what would happen to these, how are these ecosystems how are they reacting and what is their metabolism? Are they still productive? Would they be less productive? So my time there was I was able to go out into the Arctic and see these things. And then I'll try and go to the next phase. So that was us out in the research town in Nyalesund in the Arctic. Steve, I'm sure, will show a bit more of the project and really what it was all about. But this is what it was like when we were out there in the field and the instrumentation that we had to use to go and find these things. So it entailed us being out on the boat, getting different kinds of measurements like water samples so that we could figure out what was going on with the chemistry of the water in terms of ocean acidification. So you're looking at all these different ecosystems in these regions and you would just assume that it's just the temperature is rising, but there's so many other factors that are changing as well. And it's important to kind of measure and see what's going on there. So that was kind of my experience that we were able to be there firsthand and figure out what was going on.
So, Megan, how long have you spent in this place?
I think in the summer we spent about a month down there, maybe just a little bit less. It was quite interesting. We arrived at the start of summer. There was a lot of snow on the ground and stuff. And the longer we stayed, the quicker it melted. Obviously, it was just the changing of the seasons. But when I arrived, it was quite like, oh, this is how quickly things are changing. But it was very cool to see.
You were mentioning the fact that it's at Nyalesund. I guess we have various ways of pronouncing the name. Is it so? It's part of Svalbard.
Yes.
Can you maybe locate it geographically?
Sure. So Svalbard is up in the Arctic Circle. So Svalbard is part of Nyalesund. I don't really have a map on me to show. I should have had that.
But it's within the Arctic Circle.
I guess it's like 79° north. So pretty north of Norway, basically, and 79 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
So like 1,000 kilometers from the North Pole.
Okay. So Steve, can you maybe follow up on that and talk about the general framework of the experience of Megan? So in your research.
Yeah, of course. I think the idea really of what we do in Nyalesund is we know with climate is changing, the ocean is warming, there's sea ice is disappearing, there's the melting, like the thawing of permafrost, glaciers are melting and retreating. And all of that is really affecting coastal organisms. And so we have like an increase in turbidity, a decrease in salinity, increase of temperature, decrease of pH. And all of that is really affecting the community, and kelp are affected by that. What we know, what we think is that kelp will actually potentially benefit from it, and kelp might extend in the Arctic actually. And so we try with the project to see which species will be like the winners in these changing oceans, which species will be the losers, and then what will be the impact on the role that these organisms play, and notably the role that they play on the carbon cycle. And I can show you a few slides about some experiments also that we do.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. Where is it?
Well, as you are sharing your screen, let's have a look to the first. It's Megan, so it's part of your video of your immersion project.
Correct, yeah.
Oh, we will see where is Nielsen.
There we go, the map.
No.
I knew it was going to be somewhere.
Somewhere north.
Steve, are you winning your battle with your share screen?
No, I'm ready. I didn't want to interrupt this nice video.
It just, I don't see your screen. Oh, it's here. Okay.
Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to show you a few slides about what it involves when we work.
Sorry, Steve, you just unshare your screen.
I just unshare it.
Yeah.
Okay, doesn't want to go full screen then. I will just share it not full screen then.
Yeah, do it the old way.
Yeah, old style. There we go. Okay, you see it now? Yeah, perfect. I just wanted to share a few slides to show you what it involves when we want to work on kelp in the Arctic. Those images were taken like a few weeks ago, like in March. We were in the Arctic doing some diving there to collect the kelp, and it can be a bit challenging to work in a cold environment. You can see a lot of time was spent to just remove the ice around the dive boat to be able to go out. You can see in this video where we're like struggling to just get the boats out of the harbor in order to go to collect the kelps.
It's just all frozen everywhere, and you're going outside to collect kelp.
Yeah, I mean, we have to. And the water was negative 1.6 at this time. So yeah, you can see some days where, the ice actually really moves on the fjord. So if you have if you're lucky with the wind and the tide, you can have a nice day with a bit of like clear water and no ice. So it was a bit challenging. And then I just also wanted to show you doing science in the Arctic, or actually almost anywhere, involves also a lot of other activities such as plumbing. We've been doing a lot of plumbing to set up new pumps, set up new tanks. We work in the Arctic. We have this problem, for example, on the right, you can see the tanks. They were nicely filled with water and kelp, and the water stopped flowing for one night, and the next morning is what you see. Everything is frozen. It was like negative 25 at that time. And then so finally it can sort of work. This is like our team when we were there. We have all our mesocosm. We're going to test the effect of different conditions, different temperature, different lights. Here you see the same setup a bit later under the snow with all the pipes, all the tubing. So there's a lot of logistics to run those experiments, and then we can finally start to play with the kelp and do some experiments. So it was just just to share a little bit what it involves to do this kind of experiments. And but yeah, at the end it's pretty rewarding and we can do some really cool stuff.
Thank you, Steve, for sharing this experience. Actually, you're just coming back from the Arctic just a couple of days ago.
Yep.
So yeah, thank you for sharing these pictures. Do you want to open the question?
Yeah, maybe going back to Ludwig's research. It's one species that you're focusing on, but can your research give us an indication for kind of general trends across other species?
So I cannot speak for all the species. That's the big thing. Like when you do ecophysiology, you have to focus on a model organism. The thing that motivated us also to took this fish species is that it's within everywhere in the northern hemisphere. And in almost every lake, even Arctic lake, you might find like tree spine stickleback. So of course, the ideal thing will be to do on more species, but for instance, like to do the kind of experiment we are doing, we need to rear like the fish for like 2, 3, 4 generation in the lab with different setup. So there is also the manpower and the infrastructure that might be quite limiting, explaining why there's not been that much. But then it's quite interesting also to look at that, to see how all those like potential like mechanism can occur and give us like an idea if like fish might be able to cope with the condition or not.
Fantastic. So for the region you guys are working in, the polar regions, I would like to know why data from these regions is so crucial to climate science in particular. Maybe Steve?
Well, I think it's crucial because it's changing very quickly. This is really, when we talk about hotspot of climate change, the Arctic is really an important one. I mean, temperature is going to rise by about 5 to 6 degrees in the Arctic. We know it's the place also where ocean acidification is the strongest. We have melting of glacier, melting of permafrost. So already like everything is changing very, very rapidly in the Arctic. And like Christophe was mentioning, I used to work in the Arctic before. So I've worked in the Arctic for 15 years, a bit more, 18 years. Oh, I'm old. I can see it changing, but it's not that much time. But I didn't go there for like 10 years, and when I went back there, I could see the glacier that have been retreating for several kilometers. So it's impressive. It's changing very, very quickly.
That's something that when you came back, you told me that, and it's very impressive to see this difference. And it's not something we see that often here locally in temperate areas. And it reminded me of something I heard from one of your colleagues working in the Arctic. It was at the last COP, and it was saying like, well, guys, maybe my most important concern is that my daughter will never see the lands where I grew up because it's totally changing. And that's what we're seeing now in just a few years. It's what everyone is going to see in the rest of the world in the next decades.
Yeah,
sure. Maybe for Megan as well. Obviously, this.
There's a question for Steve from Lucia. Lucia is saying that apparently you're doing research during the warm months of the year. So,
yeah.
What about the research during the coldest months of the year?
In March, which is the coldest month of the year in Svalbard. But yeah, no, you're right that a lot of the data that we have actually comes from like experiments or like data collected in summer. And that's why we're trying to go a bit like earlier in the season to collect those data. With Megan, we have also done some work in winter, early winter, to look at the response of kelp during the polar night. Mm-hmm. There are also now a bunch of projects that try to do like year-round work in Svalbard. So it's clearly a weakness in the data that we have. There's like it's a clear bias. We have mostly like summer data, but I think scientists are aware of it, and we're trying to correct for that.
Exactly, I agree. I think it's that seasonality that you would want to see in the change, and that allows us, like, it would be more convenient to always go in summer, but missing what happens in the winter in the dark, like we're looking at seaweed or kelp. How does that, as something as a primary producer without sun, what's happening to it in that season? Things that we'd want to find out,
So obviously for you, Megan, going to these extremely cold, pretty intense places, how is that for you in your emotional state? How is it, like, practically? Is it difficult? Is it something you enjoy?
Definitely, I would say something I enjoy going to these extreme places, and as you say, like where you see the change happen firsthand. It's really, like the colleague said, like worried that your children will never see the world that Like, I feel quite lucky that I got to go out there and see what it looks like now, because probably the next time I do, it won't look like that at all, And I think as a scientist, it's really important to go out there and see the work that you're working on, be able to know the environment and understand how it works, how it feels, and it would inspire you to want to keep on learning about those kind of things.
It's really powerful. And being a scientist in this type of environment is really particular because you're saying it, Megan and Steve, you're seeing things that people are not going to be able to see in the near future. And I remember, Steve, in one of the classes that you teach on coral reef, you also tell students to, if they want, to go see them, because maybe that we're not going to see that quite soon. So, Steve, do you sometimes think about that, like you're witnessing a lot of situations on Earth which are going to not be the same in the near future?
That's depressing conversation.
The world on his shoulders.
No pressure, Steve.
No, I mean, yes, we're aware of this. We realize that we are lucky in some way to be able to work in those environments, those places. And it's, I guess we're all a bit sad when we think that we see how fast things are changing and how our children maybe will not see like a very nice coral reefs, and maybe even actually our generation were not really able to see what is a real coral reef when you talk with all people that used to work on coral reefs. But to go back to the Arctic, I think things are changing there, very quickly, and for sure we're going to lose a lot of like pure Arctic species. But not everything is bad too. Like if you're a kelp scientist, you are pretty happy. Kelps are pretty happy in the Arctic. Their surface area is increasing, their productivity is increasing, and on the bright side, this might help to buffer a little bit climate change. They have this role of storing carbon, and they can be like a carbon sink. So hopefully this will help us a little bit to deal with climate change.
Exactly. Can I just say, I think seeing those extreme events like that makes the bigger events that happen now, like what's happening in Nice with the UN and everything that's going on, it's like, it's time to make big decisions, to make big changes and save these things, As a scientist, if you go out and see them, you're seeing a change and you're even more impassioned to push for these big decisions to be made and for countries to start saving things that we might lose one day, which I think is really important.
That actually leads very well onto the next question of kind of what's the international cooperation like in these regions, in the Arctic and Antarctic? Do you see a lot of cooperation, and do you think the UNOC is a good platform for this to improve?
Also cooperation in science and research.
Yeah. I mean, I think, there's a lot for, I think we have a lot to learn from the cooperation actually happening in the polar areas. It's, like where we work in Yellowstone, there are like 10 to 15 different nationalities working there. If you go in Antarctic too, it's a place where a lot of people are collaborating too. So I think there's a lot to learn there.
Definitely.
Maybe last question to Ludovic. It's not part of your research directly, but we talk a lot about changes here in the ecosystem. Sorry, but do you also see that in Finland? Or do you hear people talking about that around you?
Yeah, some of my supervisors are working directly on the Baltic Sea, which is one of the most quickly changing sea on the planet, and there are hypoxic events almost every summer, leading to massive mortality. And that's the worrying thing, is that, for instance, they are studying on salmon nets that are quite sensitive, but then my fish are really strong. So when you start to see that my fish that are quite strong start to struggle, it's not it's a bit depressing, to say the least. So yeah, there are definitely closer to home on the Baltic Sea, already some changes that are visible.
Fantastic. Well, unfortunately, we're kind of running out of time.
Yeah, because Thibaut is not there, but we're going to see his video right after. So maybe you want to conclude with, in 30 seconds, giving us your kind of take-home message for the audience, starting with you, Ludovic, if you want.
So I would say that, we need definitely to study more to better understand, because we are running out of time, but also it seems the organisms are running out of time. So that's the thing.
Megan?
100%. I think it's the same case of running out of time, but it's important to remember that all these ecosystems change. Things are changing now, and it's up to us to change as well to kind of save them and make sure they stay on a better path.
And that's a really good message for UNOC, for sure. And Steve?
Well, they already said everything. But I think, yeah.
I'm sure you have something wise.
No, I don't. I guess, no, just like polar areas are just basically, polar areas are super interesting. And I think we have to put a lot of effort to study them before we lose them, to actually know, to have some kind of strong baseline to monitor and see what is happening. And I think it's a very nice place to see how things are changing quickly. And that's a perfect example to show the people, no, climate change is not happening in 100 years from now. It's happening now.
Thank you to all of you. So it's not over, the last segment of this session. It's a recorded interview with Thibaut Combaz. He's a PhD student currently in Canada, in Quebec, and he's working in Arctic. And kind of, I would say, his PhD is made possible thanks to climate change. He's studying the narrow strait called Nares Strait between Greenland and Canada, a place that has never been really studied before because it was always covered by ice. So he was supposed to be here, but unfortunately, as I said, he had to run to fix something on the Amundsen. So he's going to explain you with some kind of nice videos of, okay, spoiler, polar bears. Also, his experience also on these expeditions in the poles. Thank you, Steve, Ludovic, and Megan. And so,
Thank you very much.
And now it's the floor to Thibaut and me, but earlier when it was sunny outside. Hi, Thibaut, and thank you for joining us on this 24-hour journey. So, Thibaut, you're currently in Canada, and so, well, first, who are you, Thibaut?
Yes, thank you for having me. So currently I am in Quebec City at Laval University, where I am doing my PhD. I'm currently into my second year of PhD. Before that, I was at the University of Aberdeen in Scotland, where I did my bachelor's and my master's degree. So I've just started my PhD, and so I'm working in Takuvik laboratory, and I'm working on benthic ecosystems in the Canadian Arctic. So during my PhD, I'm trying to understand how the benthic ecosystem, how they function, how what is the diversity, and yeah. So basically, one of the specific goal of my PhD is to basically explore an area which we've never been before, we've never seen before. That is the Nares Strait. So that is located in the northwest coast of Greenland. Before that, it was not really accessible because of sea ice, but now the sea ice conditions allow us to go there. So we have been able to collect some samples, and right now I'm spending a lot of time in the lab trying to identify all the different organisms to see how they distribute along this region, and maybe to discover some potential new species.
Okay, so from Aberdeen to Canada, you like when it's cold.
Yes.
But also, basically, your PhD is made possible thanks to climate change. It's interesting. What's the type of organisms you're collecting, and how do you do that?
Basically, I'm focusing on macrofauna. So these are organisms that are usually between 500 micrometers and a few centimeters, 2 to 3 centimeters. So in order to collect the benthos, we usually deploy a boxcar. So that is like a huge box, a huge box basically, that we then deploy and settle at the seafloor from 100 meters down to even 2,000, even 3,000 meters deep. That then collects all the sediments and that stays intact, and then that brings back on the ship. And then we can then sieve the sediments to extract all the organisms.
Okay, and you preserve the organisms, and you only have a look to the organisms when you're back in the lab?
Yes, I do all the taxonomy when I'm back in the lab. But when I'm in the ship, I also do other experiments. I do some sort of incubations. So these are like small aquariums. And basically, I try to measure all the different fluxes, oxygen fluxes, nutrients, also inorganic carbon, to better understand how the benthic ecosystems actually have a role in the global carbon pump.
So in your PhD, you're in the second year of your PhD. How does that work? How long do you spend, on boats and on the lab, and what about the vessel? What about the conditions there?
Well, one thing to note is that in Canada, so a PhD is usually 4 years compared to where it is usually only 3. So I have been able already to go twice on the field. So in Narrow Strait on the Amundsen ship, that is an icebreaker from the Canadian government. So I've already spent a few months in the Arctic collecting a lot of samples. And right now, I'm spending a lot of time in the lab doing all the taxonomy, because every time we do collect a boxcar, well, we have a lot of organisms in the sediments, and it takes a lot of time to just trying to identify the species, because most of them we have a very little information, so it's really hard to actually identify the species.
Have you already identified or not identified, never identified species, new species?
Yeah, so there's a lot of organisms that we have very little information about, so we can't make sure that this is actually a new species or not. And well, I am not qualified enough to say that this organism is a new species, but when I think so, we have qualified people in the lab that can help us.
I hope you already what about the name of a new species, a Combasus something? Or...
I have a lot of ideas.
What about the life in the Arctic on board these vessels? How many people are in this ship? And I don't know if you want to share a few crazy things that happened there.
So I've been twice on the Amundsen, so that is an icebreaker that can carry around between 70 to 80 people. So it's quite a big ship. So half of the people there are the crew, and half of the people are the scientists. And usually, so we spend around 6 weeks each time. Then there is a crew change, and the life on board is quite comfortable, if I can say that. We have everything. We have a lot of food. We have good bedrooms. Everything's okay. But well, the working hours are quite difficult, because we never stop working. We go from one station to another without never stopping. So it's quite tiring.
You have shifts?
We can have shifts. Yeah, but depending on the team, if you are lucky enough to have a big team, then you can work with your partners. But in my case, I was almost alone, so I had to do everything on my own.
And so some crazy things, some things that were impactful for you. I know the color, the sky, the animals, the impact of climate change, if you can feel it.
Yeah, so one of the main reasons I got into my PhD is because I wanted to be part of an expedition. Because during my bachelor and my master's, I was working on Arctic samples, but they were not mine. They were just collected by other people. So I wanted to go there. So first, I was really, really happy to actually take part to an expedition to see what it's like. That is proper science. We have a lot of different teams working around different subjects. So that's really interesting. And of course, the landscapes and the nature there are just amazing. So I was really, really fortunate to see that. But of course, well, we can already see some changes. As I just said, the region we went to, so the Narrow Strait, is usually almost inaccessible because of the sea ice conditions. But in the past 10 to 15 years, so the sea ice conditions disappeared. The sea ice, both in extent, in thickness, just reduced dramatically. So in a way, we can go there now to see what it's like, but I mean, that's not a good thing. Yeah.
You want to share something to conclude for all the students, alumni, but also all the people who would like to become a scientist working on the Arctic?
Yes, I mean, well, there's a lot of things that I would like to say, but I mean, I really love my PhD. I know I am lucky in a way to actually, I've been able to do 2 expeditions, which is already kind of a lot for a PhD. But of course, we have to keep in mind that the field work is just a part of the PhD, a really small part, actually. So, for example, I've been on the field for around 10 weeks in total, but just these 10 weeks take me afterwards, I don't know, 8 to 12 months in the lab just doing taxonomic work. So it's a lot of work after that. But I mean, yeah, it's just amazing.
It's the same at Lérins, finally. Huh? A few
Yes.
days, a few hours there, and 1 semester of work.
Yeah.
Private joke. Thank you, Thibaut, for this time. And so good luck also, because I know that you have to fix a few things on the Amundsen really soon.
Yes, we do.
Thank you, Thibaut. Enjoy your
Thank you.
PhD. Yes, we're back. Thank you for staying here, Megan and Ludovic. I promised you a polar bear that is actually just right there. He sent me the video just right after. And so he sent me the video just after about the previous mission that just ended. And yeah, the beautiful pictures. I think I have to move on. Yeah, it's just amazing. All of this ice. So he mentioned like using like a box course. This is that in this little tiny dingy stuff. So the conditions have to be very calm, of course, when they're doing that. Really close to the ice break. Of course, the Amundsen is a much larger ship than that, and it's just a small annex. Yeah, of course, and there are polar bears. I remember they say, "Oh yeah, I have a video of a polar bear. You know, it's a polar bear." I understand. So yeah, I guess we'll finish on the polar bear. Thank you, Megan and Ludovic and Steve.
Yes, and Steve. We'll see him later.
For saying that, and yeah. Enjoy what comes next for you. The next session for us, it's session 13 in a little bit less than 30 minutes. And well, we're going in the Pacific to talk about the Pacific with the people there. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.